everyone, and welcome to the big 20th episode of Soundproof. Thanks for joining us here on, again, our 20th episode. What a cool number. We've been doing this for almost a year now. Of course, my name is Brendan Lewis. I'm joined by Jake Muller, and we are respectively Mr. B-Dog46 and Major Bowman on all online outlets, and we're happy to be back with you with our 20th episode of Soundproof.
Yeah, that's wild. 20 is, like...
we haven't even talked about it until like right now.
I know, yeah. I was thinking about it earlier when I was like writing the script for this, but I was like, wow, this is like a pretty big number, 20.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Well, I think when we started, we didn't really have any like goals or anything. We just wanted to do it, and I guess do it until we didn't want 20 more, and we're still at a point where we're enjoying it. So here's to 20 more.
Yeah, definitely. We're trying to kind of plug through this downtime in VGC, and of course we've still got, you know, at least another 3 months of downtime, or like 3 or 4 months, because Worlds is canceled and everything like that. So the earliest we could start to see the circuit theoretically pop up is like September, October. But we'll keep pushing through that. Of course, we've kind of talked a little bit about how, you know, things are a little bit slower, so we might not be pushing out episodes every 2 weeks, you know, like clockwork. But we're gonna do our best, and we're here with episode 20 this week. We've got a couple tournaments to talk about. We'll touch on the ladder, which is like honestly not a lot to talk about this week. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But of course, we're going to start with our Dash 20 Pokemon. Kind of an eclectic bunch this week, as it always is. There's some cool ones though, so we'll start out with number 20, Jake, and you know, kind of I think I said this as it pertains to some of the early Pokemon like Pidgey and Rattata, but Raticate, one of those Pokemon that was kind of like designed to be forgettable. Like this is like the embodiment of an early route normal type.
Yeah, no, like Raticate really has no like qualities that set it apart from anything else. It's just kind of a rat, and they made it a rat, and that's, I mean, about it. Like, you can tell that some of like the early like Hyper Fang and Super Fang, I think, were definitely designed with Raticate in mind. Yeah, but otherwise, like, I mean, it's there.
It didn't get Bite until like Gen 6 or something like that.
Really?
I think that yeah, until it was like some Pokemon that it was in an egg group with. Like, it didn't learn Bite for the longest time, which was kind of like a weird piece of trivia.
Yeah.
Like one of those like trivia things. Like, did you see Brady's tweet that went viral?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. It was like a webcomic format where it was talking about like how Grimmsnarl is a dark tape. And
oh wait, yeah. I did see that.
So Raticate was like one of those like unfortunate bits of trivia where it didn't learn Bite. And then the other thing that I always think about with Raticate is that episode of the anime on the SSN where Ash just like trades away his Butterfree for Raticate.
Yeah.
And everybody that watched the show just like face palmed the hardest. They were like, "Ash, no, baby, what is you doing?"
Yeah. That was funny.
That was hard to watch. And then he got it back eventually because he threw a fit. But you know, Butterfree didn't forget. And 120 is Staryu, which is kind of a cool Pokemon as far as like a design type thing, and then I lose a lot of respect for it when I hear it make its noise in the anime.
See, I actually kind of love that noise. Like some of the earliest episodes I've watched were like the ones where Misty's featured, and like the Ash Misty gym battle episode is one that was like an early childhood favorite of mine, and so like I always got to watch those, and I think it's kind of cool. Like, it's entirely not related, but just like a star spinning through the air screaming yeah. I don't know, I just love it.
I just think it would have been better if it just didn't make noises at all, especially because it doesn't have like a mouth.
Yeah, that's a confusing thing. Like, where's that noise coming from?
It could have made like a buzzing noise or like a ooh noise, but instead it just like
what was that?
Like channels like a freaking karate style. All right, the next Pokemon is Swinub, which I think is, I don't know. Okay, but my thing about Swinub is if you look at its sprite, especially the earlier sprites, you could very easily think that its nose are its eyes.
Yeah.
All right. And some of you that are listening to this are like, what the hell is he talking about? Go just look up a picture of Swinub, and if you've never seen the nose as the eyes, I want you to really focus really hard on its nose and thinking about how those are its eyes, and it really just like changes your perspective of the entire Pokemon. It's like the rabbit duck like picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My Swinub like trivia bit is when I was like really young and playing through Gen 2 for the first time, I could never get past the ice cave. Like I literally just couldn't.
It was hard.
I know, and like as like a 7-year-old,
I really hard.
I just didn't know how to get through it, and so
there was no internet.
Yeah, exactly. And like once I just had it in my head that once I got to the ice cave, I just had to start over if I wanted to keep playing. So I knew that like once I got to ice cave, I would see the Swinub in there, and then it would just be done. Like I didn't play through Gold and Silver and actually like beat Claire and like move on to Kanto until like after Platinum or Heart Gold and Soul Silver had come out. So like at one point I went back to do like the original Silver and like played through the game fully. But
yeah, like I think I made it through at some point, but either it was like entirely by accident or I asked one of the big kids at school to do it, you know? Like, it was definitely not something that I was like consciously able to do by myself, because that puzzle is like still involved. Like to this day, if you were to go back and try and figure out that whole like where you have to push the boulders in, and that's like the third puzzle in the cave where you have to do like the ice puzzles before you get to the one where you have to push the boulders down.
I didn't even get to the boulders. I literally the first ice puzzle is just the end of the road, dead end.
Yeah, it's so hard. that is up there with the Gen 3 ice gym where you have to step on the ice to, like,
that one was fun though. I liked that one.
Like break every floor. Yeah, I think maybe because we were a little bit older, but I always thought that was like really difficult too. And you think about how people are always complaining in this day and age about how easy the game. Like we'll never see a puzzle like that ever again, which is wild. But yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was kind of like a repressed childhood memory. Also, as an aside, an ice ground type. That's like one of the best offensive combinations you could ask for.
Yeah, that's true.
Mamoswine should be way better than it is. I'm just saying.
Defensively, it's garbage, but
yeah. Anyway, 320 is Wailmer, which is a great Pokemon. I have a soft spot for Wailmer. That was like when I was playing through Gen 3 and I didn't take Mudkip as the starter, as I would always like seek out Wailmer as the water type, especially because you can get it kind of early. Yeah. If you get a good rod and you know where to go.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of cool. I like the design. It's just a big kind of derpy whale, but it's cute. I went to SeaWorld in San Antonio with my mom a couple years ago, and I caught a Wailmer there that I named Shamu. So I caught it in Pokemon Go. Topical for the rest of this episode.
Oh, really? I thought you meant you were like talking like you caught a real Wailmer. And you
Brendan, I need you to shut up. Just like don't talk. But yeah, I caught it and named it Shamu. The ethics of the park itself are not a topic we need to discuss on this podcast.
We turned a blind eye.
It was a fun mother-son bonding experience, and I got a Shamu out of it, so it's fine.
There you go. Hashtag 420 is Cherubi, which is kind of the butt of a lot of jokes. Thanks to like the 420 blaze and stuff.
It also kind of looks like a butt.
I know. I'm sure that it wasn't made with that in mind, but like it could have been.
They could have, yeah. They really kind of shouldn't have made Pokemon number 420 a grass type. Like that, it's just low hanging fruit.
Or a fire type. Like they needed to go in in a very different direction.
Water.
Yeah. Like imagine if they had made like Torkoal or something.
Oh
like
god.
That,
Or if there was a fire grass type, they would have made that 420.
They could have gone there with it. Yeah. And if any Pokemon was to be a fire grass type, it could be the Sunform Cherim,
True.
It kind of looks like it could be that, right? 520, speaking of Pokemon that are like designed to be forgettable.
Yeah.
Tranquil, which I have been reminded this week is a Pokemon.
Even that whole line is just kind of forgettable. It's probably one of the least remembered like Route 1 birds, because it just like it's not of any use competitively. It doesn't really have any other special traits about it other than like the different sprites for male and female.
Hypnosis. That's the only competitive thing.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's kind of just exists and no one really knows it.
Yep. I feel like like if you took Pidove, right, and you looked at Pidove, you could be like, okay, there's enough going on with this Pokemon that you could theoretically, like, with good design, make a cool line out of it.
Yeah.
And then you see Unfezant and you lose all hope. And like, I don't know, not a cool line. Lines that are cool though.
Yes.
620 is Mienshao.
Yes. I love Mienshao.
Good Pokemon.
It's like Mienshao was a nostalgia thing for me because when I first started playing like competitive Pokemon, it was in like very late Gen 4, but then mostly in Gen 5 when like Mienshao was a pretty good like singles mon, and I used it a lot. I really liked the idea of like fake out U-turn generator stuff. It was just like it was a fun to use Pokemon in singles. It was kind of one of the earliest Pokemon I remember using in a competitive setting, so it's kind of fun to look back and remember.
Yeah, it also has, in a very similar vein, a soft spot for me in that regard because it was on the first VGC team that I ever took to an event.
Aww.
When I placed third at a PC in Springfield, Massachusetts. Very cool. But yeah, I was doing like it was like a quote unquote like Kangaskhan counter because it has inner focus. And,
yeah.
You know, Oko's it with high jump kick. So that was kind of like my thought behind it in early 2015.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool one. 720 is Hoopa, which I don't really care for all that much as a design.
I really like Unbound. I think that design is really cool. Because like Unbound kind of connotes like reckless and like aggressive and that kind of thing, and that's definitely what it looks like in the Unbound form.
It embodies it competitively kind of too.
Yeah, because the hyperspace moves, like they're kind of all out. You go through Protect. Hyperspace Fury specifically lowers your defense, so like you're doing a lot of damage with it, but you're not really caring if you take much in return. And I don't know, I really like it. It's another kind of nostalgia factor because it was really good when I first started playing DOU. It was one of the top mons, so I used it a lot because it was like really good on Trick Room teams, and that's something I liked playing back then. So I think it's cool. I think the design's good. I like the design of the regular form too. It's pretty neat. So I'm a fan.
I think that it's kind of interesting, Hoopa, to change gears just slightly, in that it kind of drives like the fill for what could have been a lot of plot holes in certain like aspects of the story. Where like they did that whole thing with where like, okay, we need to think of a way where we can encounter legends in the post game.
Yeah.
Okay, how about there's this Pokemon, and it has a whole bunch of rings, and if you go through them, well, let me tell you. And they've kind of done the like pushed the same narrative in Masters too, where like oh god, Ho-Oh is on this artificial island. How the heck did it get here?
Yeah.
Well, there's this Pokemon, and it has a whole bunch of rings.
Yeah.
And if you go through the rings, well, let me tell you.
That is pretty funny.
So
I forgot that.
Kind
was
of
like
like
the whole...
it just like fills in a plot hole.
Yeah.
Pun
intended.
All right, and then our
hole.
What's
pun
that?
Intended? Is that a pun?
Plot hole.
Plot
yes.
hole.
Yep. There it is.
Plot hyperspace
Plot
hole.
hyperspace hole. Yep. And then the last Pokemon for this week, which I know we talked a little bit about, is Greedent, number 820, which I like quite a bit. I really like, you know, in a week where we've talked about Raticate and Tranquil, they kind of go out of their way to really kind of like make a memorable early route normal type.
Yeah. I mean,
it's cool.
It's like fine. I feel like I like Greedent less than most people just because I'm not like super excited about it. But like it's cute. I like the theme.
Berry.
He do eat berry. He store berry in cheek.
Yeah, he store berry. He doesn't learn recycle though. That was
I know. Yeah.
I spent
Greedent
a long
just like
time,
wishes it was
like,
Gen 7 Snorlax.
Yeah. Like that was kind of like I spent a while kind of like theorying. Okay, you know, this is theoretically with the nerfs to the pinch berries like a Snorlax replacement, where you just use Citrus Cheek Pouch, right? And you're getting like the same amount of recovery without needing Gluttony, but it doesn't get recycle.
Yeah.
Bummer. Okay, so those are our 20s. We're gonna move on to the ladder quickly, and as Jake and I somewhat alluded to, it's kind of like crapshoot at this point. For those of you that are kind of in touch with the VGC scene on Twitter, there's one individual who has like 6 accounts in the top 13 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually go through and like cross-reference his Twitter posts to see which teams were his and which teams were not, but just, you know, keep in mind that the stats are heavily skewed, and if he wanted to, you know, be a prominent figure on the Soundproof podcast, then he succeeded. and he was, that was an option that was available to him. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, there's Togepi on the ladder this week.
there are two of these same teams in the top 10, so I'm guessing those are both of his.
Yeah, it could be. So just take a lot. This is not like, there are some weeks where we've had the ladder. We've been like, okay, this is kind of interesting. We see this, we see this. It's like at least semi-representative of some of the things that are going on in the meta right now. Don't. No.
Do not take
week.
That as fact.
Not this week.
Yeah.
All right. So that said, we've got Bog Standard at the top of the ladder. This is the team that Fevzi used to win the Champions Cup, I believe, with Lapras, Arcanine, Tyranitar, Mimikyu, Dusclops, and Conkeldurr. That's a pretty well-known composition at this point.
The rating, though, 2094 is pretty high. I don't know if I've seen
huge.
one that high in a while.
I don't know. I don't think I've seen anyone crest 2100 just yet, but 2094 is crazy.
Yeah.
Especially given that the next closest is 2006.
Yeah.
Which is another kind of standard. Well, we'll get smacked with two standard teams after I talk the whole week up. But this is Charizard, Venusaur, Torkoal, Dusclops, Tyranitar, and Togekiss, which is another kind of standard composition that's going around where you have like that Sun offense core and then round it out with good stuffs.
Yeah, this is also the duplicate one. It's also number 9. So.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not super surprising. This is a really good team, I think.
One thing I did want to briefly take the opportunity to touch on is the Torkoal set that Marcus Statter used to win Beast Coast. So I don't think we actually pulled the teams up, but Marcus Statter, we talked about it on our last show that Jake and I were kind of doing some casting for Beast Coast, the Beast Coast Invitational, which was won by Marcus Statter as he defeated PokeAlex, and he was running basically the hard Trick Room comp, but his Torkoal set was kind of designed to take on a lot of things that he thought Alex would be using, and it's also, I think, kind of cool in its own right. And he was running Overheat, Body Press, Yawn, Protect, Torkoal with Figgy Berry, and max defense.
Yeah, I really like that.
So it's really cool. Yeah, it turned it into a Tyranitar check.
Yeah, pretty much.
He took a rock fall on stream.
Yeah, he did. I think he said that with max defense, you OHKO pretty much any Tyranitar that isn't Dynamaxed, which is pretty cool.
Right. And he did 80-85% to one that was Dynamax
too,
which I thought was wild. And I was just thinking about how much I really like that set. He kind of explained it as a way that I think this was a really smart call against Alex's team. But also, if you think about a way that especially these comps, the way that the players play Torkoal, is it's not always being used as interruption spammer. Where sometimes you lead Charizard, Venusaur, and you want to switch your Torkoal in to get Sun on turn 1, and being a modest attacker with or quiet attacker, I guess, with Eruption, is not always conducive to being switched in and out all the time. But if you give it a berry and you have Yawn, and suddenly you have this utility and a way to check Tyranitar for Charizard, it really changes the way that it interacts with a lot of its common matchups. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I guess we'll move on to the number 3 team on the ladder this week, which
this is cute.
This is where we derail a little bit. The team is Espeon, Jolteon, Milotic, Mimikyu, Arcanine, and Ferrothorn. So some familiar faces there, and then also an Espeon and a Jolteon.
It's fun though. Jolteon has not ever been good, and really Espeon hasn't either. But it's kind of fun to see these mons. I think we watched a replay of it, and we saw a Jolteon fake Tears of Dusclops, and then Espeon KO it with Max Phantasm.
Yeah.
So I guess you can pull off some kind of funny stuff with it, but
yeah,
I think that's about where the utility ends.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, this is not. I feel like this is never a serious attempt at team building, right?
Right.
This is just I really want 2 evolutions on my team. And there's one player that has kind of been maining Jolteon that managed to top cut some of the online tournaments, so it does have sort of some utility niche, but I have not seen an Espeon since the EV teams.
Yeah, me neither.
All right, so the next team on the ladder is kind of a wild one, and this is one where we were kind of doing some research because we were like, how the heck did this team get all the way up here? It looks like the player actually like kind of like laddered up here, and then the replay that was pulled by the website was from a best of 3 that he used in some sort of an online team tour.
Yeah.
So take this with a grain of salt, but the team is Dragapult, Clefairy, Hawlucha, Diggersby, Blastoise, and I'm not misspeaking, Togepi. Togepi.
The baby.
I'm baby.
Ew. No. Oh my god.
So yeah, it's a Togepi.
Yeah.
And
we have double NFE follow me users.
Oh, double NFE follow me. So I was just kind of like, okay, like, is there a competitive application of this that I'm missing? And I was
there
like,
can't be.
I was like, wait a minute, it's a normal type follow me user. And then Jake was like, hey, idiot, did you forget about Indeedee? And if we're gonna go down that route, Furret.
Yeah. Is Togepi even a normal type? I thought it was pure fairy.
Oh, you're right, it's pure fairy. Never mind. Forget me.
Yeah.
I saw it use Tri Attack, I think.
Yeah, you can use Tri Attack with Serene Grace.
Normal type. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what the heck Togepi is doing there. It's clearly just for the memes. It's like I think
yeah,
it's like disrespect to your team
yeah.
opponent. The 5th team on the ladder this week is a team of, we'll say some common cores here. Dragapult. That thing is called
Colossal,
Mimikyu, Ferrothorn, Alchemy, and Incineroar. So, like some common faces there. You can kind of see, you know, there's the Trick Room mode, and then like, you know, I don't want to lose to Venusaur, so here's an Alchemy.
Yeah.
So yeah, some kind of like different options, which is people have been kind of exploring with Colossal a little bit. You know, we saw Wolf like win the IC with that team that you know has a bunch of different modes, and then Aaron obviously got second in one of the tournaments we'll talk about. But it looks like people are playing around with Colossal a little bit more.
Yeah, it's cool. I think it's a cool mod. I like obviously the Colossal Dragapult is really solid because you have that super fast surf. There's other options too. Like we've seen some Aqua Jet users with Colossal. I think Primarina and Inteleon have both filled that role in different teams. There's some cool stuff you can do.
Blastoise does it too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. The next team on the ladder is good stuff's through and through. It's like Ted without the Togekiss.
Yeah.
There's Tyranitar and Incineroar. Milotic, I'm blanking on names again tonight, Jake. Excadrill, Mimikyu, and Dragapult. So some pretty familiar places. You can kind of get a pretty good idea of what's going on there. The number 7 team is the Lucamere team that's been around since Series 2. There's a Durant, there's a Milotic, there's a Gothitelle, there's a Sylveon, there's a Tyranitar, and there's an Arcanine, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about that one. We know exactly what that does. Some fun mons at number 8 here. There is a Dracovish, and there is a Braviary, so that's kind of a common core, especially along with Whimsicott. That's like an offensive core that we've seen a little bit. But there's also a Shiinotic, which is not a Pokemon that we've seen hardly at all.
No.
And there's also a Snorlax, and there's also a Darmanitan. So kind of a wacky sort of like weird hyper offense team, and like Curselax slapped on there in case there's a Trick Room.
I feel like this is something you might see like week 1 when we thought like Braviary and Dracovish were going to be broken. Like people still thinking Snorlax is like a holdover from old metas, and like seeing a Pokemon that gets a free choice band in Darm, like, oh, I'm going to use that. And I don't really know where the Shiinotic comes from, but it's like it's a bunch of fun mons that you like have the potential to do a lot of damage all at once, but also, you know, don't appreciate a stiff breeze going by. So this is definitely like a hyper offense kind of team, I would say.
Yeah, like they don't appreciate your opponent's team having like any switch synergy to speak
of
either.
Yeah.
Like, you fall apart of the seams very quickly, but some of those offensive teams kind of do well on the ladder, as we've seen here this week. At number 9, I think that's the same 6, right, as number 2, so we're going to skip over that one. That's where we had the Torkoal discussion. And then the last team is, you've heard of Triple Ice. Well, now here's Triple Ice. Or, sorry, you've heard of... man, I ruined my whole delivery. Damn it. You've heard of Triple Ghost. Here's Triple Ice.
The funny thing is, I was going to say the same thing.
That's what it should have been.
I was legit going to say that exact same thing if you didn't.
I'm just going to freaking log off right now. But the team is Frostmoth, Alolan Ninetales, Lapras, Mimikyu, Dragapult, and Conkeldurr. So there's kind of some elements of what Febzy's team does, and then there's like a couple extra ice types.
Frostmoth, yeah. Frostmoth actually gets some pretty good like support moves. I think it has all of like Icy Wind, Struggle Bug, Tailwind, and Wide Guard.
Yep.
Which are like all good moves in their own right, but like you kind of have to have stats if you want to use those kind of moves. And
right, I was gonna say, and you're also still an Ice Bug type.
Yeah,
right?
That too.
I feel like if I had to guess, because there are already like 2 setters of Aurora Veil, that this is probably like you set up Aurora Veil and then you bring in your Frostmoth and you try to Quiver Dance and Blizzard while the hail's up or something like that. Like if I had to guess, I don't actually know, but that I would think that he's running like all of 3 supportive ice types.
Right.
What do I know? I don't ever top the ladder. So that's the ladder for that week. Again, we kind of qualified that maybe it wasn't so much to write home about, but there's some interesting stuff. And again, big thank you. We're going to pitch them every week to Babiri.net, who have vastly improved our quality of life as far as production of this podcast. So thank you to them. It's a website, again, it's Babiri.net, that like crawls the top 100 available VGC, and I think they also just added OU, so if you are looking for OU teams for Lord knows why, that's available to you as well. But they kind of started out and are like the first love is VGC, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some of the online tournaments that have happened since we've last convened. We'll go in chronological order. So a couple weeks ago was the Rose Tower Quarantine Challenge, and it's really cool that we continue to pull like really big numbers for these online tournaments. I think this is listed as 214, and then the other tournament that we'll talk about in just a minute that was hosted by Victory Road was 263. So we're still pulling like regional level numbers for these online tournaments, which is really cool. And like depending on what regional area you're familiar with, we are outdrawing regionals like by 3 or 4 fold.
That's true.
So that's kind of cool. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the teams and some of the highlights of these 2 tournaments. So we'll start with the Quarantine Challenge here, Jake, which was won by Adi, MG MFA, who I believe was using, if not a carbon copy of that Gavin Clefpult team that's going around, definitely one that closely resembles it, with the Togekiss, Incineroar, Rotom Wash, Excadrill, Dragapult, and Clefairy.
I'd be surprised if Adi didn't get that team from Gavin or like work on it with Gavin, because they know they're good friends. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like Clefairy, this is kind of the first time it's been relevant in this meta so far, and like I get it next to the Pokemon you're seeing on that team. I probably should know the sets, or at least have a good idea of the sets, but I imagine that's something like Dragon Dance, Dragapult, with the Clefairy.
Yeah, that's the Dragon Dance Life Orb one. We see the weakness policy with like on double or triple ghost comps, but this one is Dragon Dance Life Orb, I believe. And then if memory serves, it's like the Mold Breaker Excadrill, Nasty Plot Rotom. And I know the original paste of the team, I think Gavin ran it with Nasty Plot Togekiss in Champions Cup.
Ooh, that's cool.
But I think that players have since moved away from that a little bit. I know that, I don't question Gavin's team building at all, but I know some of the players that I talked to, the immediate reaction to Nasty Plot Togekiss was like, why? When there are probably like other like more impactful things that it could be doing, but he was successful with it, and the 6 continues to be successful. I know it's something that Yuri was using quite a bit. I think he won some tournament. I forget what it was. He won something.
He won the most recent Clash, I think, the Rose Tower Clash.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Was it the Clash or was it? Yeah, you're right. It's the Clash. Okay. Yeah. So that's a very influential 6 right now. And then the second team, we talked to this, the second place team piloted by Unreality. We talked about this team a little bit earlier in the show. There was the team that Wolf used to win the International Challenge with the like kind of the new age Colossal stuff, with Togekiss Colossal, Gastrodon, Dragapult, Conkeldurr, and Dusclops.
Yeah, I think this plays really well to the different Colossal modes you could run, and especially if the Dusclops is something like Brick Breaker, Bulldoze, or whatever to pop the weakness policy. But I think it's cool. I think Dragapult Colossal is just a really strong combo. It it does what it wants to do really well, and like it's still flexible enough to play against a lot of different things.
Right, and I think kind of the interesting thing and what makes this like iteration of the team so good is that Aaron and Wolf kind of like injected another level, and we've talked about this quite a bit in the past of flexibility into with the screen's Dragapult.
Mm-hmm.
So they will just like lead Dragapult Colossal, and you will go all in on the Dynamax Colossal, right? You will max your Excadrill and max Quake the slot, and they'll set Reflect and switch in Dusclops or something like that, and like you lose the game on turn 1.
Right.
So I think that the fact that it does some things like that is really neat. Some highlights in the top 8 as far as team compositions go. Nidorich, who placed top 4, is using kind of a variant of the Fevzi team that has a Toxtricity on it. So I know that's kind of a Pokemon that a lot of players have, tried to make work and has sort of like eked its way into usage, especially as Pokemon like Togekiss and Primarina continue to like stake their claim on the format. So that kind of has some interesting applications there. But as far as storylines go, and everybody in VGC loves a good storyline, one of the players that top forward was Conan, who's been around for quite a while. He's kind of like a hybrid Japanese-American player, and a lot of his like team choices and building are more influenced by the Japanese meta than the American meta. So that's like for a lot of players when he was kind of active on the American circuit, like their exposure to Eastern meta. So that's kind of cool in that sense, and he used to play quite a bit with Colin Hire, and I think Colin still kind of calls him like his teacher or his sensei or something to that effect. And they did play in top 8, and Conan knocked Colin out, I believe. So kind of an interesting little bit of history going on there.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. They don't really talk much anymore, I don't think, but kind of interesting storyline there. Because like you said, we all love a good storyline.
We all do. So we'll move on to the Victory Road May Challenge, and then I guess we can we'll pass on the Clash, even though we sort of highlighted that Yuri won it. It was won by Viper, who played really well on stream all throughout Top Cut. So I thought that was really cool to see. He's a really good player. That like basically like is cutting everything that he enters, and was able to finally take a W here. Like not a surprising win in any sense, and he was running a good stuff looking 6 too, and he also defeated a good stuff looking 6 in finals with his team being Dragapult, Mimikyu, Togekiss, Arcanine, Rotom-Wash, and Tyranitar. And then the second team that was piloted by Zine or Shohei Kimura was a team of Dragapult, Sylveon, Togekiss, Excadrill, Rotom-Wash, and Tyranitar. So a lot of similarities between those two teams. Obviously a very common 10 Pokemon that are there.
Yeah, I mean, you aren't surprised to see any of those Pokemon, in the finals of a tournament. Like maybe Sylveon, but like Sylveon's had success throughout the format so far, so like it's not something, at least I personally am surprised to see doing well. It's hard to deny that like these team comps are just solid. Like they have options against pretty much everything, and they're using all these Pokemon that are, proven to be very, very good at this point. So if you take the top 10 and throw any combination of them on a team, it's probably going to be usable.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the other highlights in top 4 real quick is that Simon, I know he's Polish, I'm going to butcher the last name, so I'm going to try. His online name is Simon, Scymon, who's a phenomenal European player that's been around for quite a while, but hasn't, necessarily been as active as some of the other folks that are playing the online circuit or the IRL circuit. I'm not really sure, but he's a really good Polish player, and he's using a pretty common composition with the Dusclops Mimikyu alongside Primarina, Ferrothorn, which is kind of like rounds out the Trick Room mode, and then Arcanine and Tyranitar are there as well. And then a Korean player rounded out the top 4, who I don't know by name or like well enough to associate with the username, but was piloting a pretty common composition that I think is actually the same 6 that we saw on the ladder.
I was going to say that. It's the same that we saw the duplicates of on the ladder. So
yeah, the Charizard, Torkoal, Venusaur stuff. And then another team, I talked to Jake a little bit about this, that I did want to highlight, is being piloted by Adrian, who is a New England local of mine and has actually had like some pretty good results. I believe he top cut the Champions Cup, but has been running a team of Charizard, Venusaur, Conkeldurr, Ninetales, Dusclops, and Rhyperior, and has kind of like established a level of infamy among top players as the Scarf Hypnosis Ninetales guy. So I know a lot of players have kind of voiced discontent about how influential sleep is and how difficult it is to stop in this format, but I think a lot of Adrian's run has kind of been keyed by that sort of idea, in that like if you don't have an answer to sleep, like you will lose to it.
Yeah, sleep is really good. Like, that's part of the reason Venusaur is so busted right now. There's not really much that can stop sleep other than like having a grass type, which doesn't work against Ninetales, obviously, because all the terrains are gone, which is one of the things that was stopping it back in the last few years or so. But it's neat. I don't disrespect that at all. I think that's if you're gonna play the sleep game, you may as well give yourself another role.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, and then rounding out our top 8 here is Edu, Santi, and Mando as their usernames online go. Edu, obviously, like maybe the least surprising cut. He's maybe one of the 3 best players in the world right now.
Yeah.
Especially in 2020. And he's using the team, I believe, that he also used in Champions Cup with the Dragapult, Venusaur, Togekiss, Incineroar, Rotom, and then that Weakness Policy Excadrill that he kind of popularized. Santi is using a very similar Colossal core to Aaron's team with the Primarina in there. And then Mando's is a little bit different than anything I've seen with Charizard, Excadrill, and DD, Hitmontop, and then that Tyranitar and Gourgeist core that was kind of popularized by Edu. So some interesting stuff there. But overall, not really a surprising top cut at all. It seems kind of like meta development has kind of slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
After it did kind of have a little bit of a time where it sort of seemed to pick up the pace kind of in and around Fevzi's success. But since then, not a whole lot, barring maybe, development of Colossal archetypes. Okay. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna wrap up the first part of our episode. In the second part of our episode, we're gonna change gears big time after we just spent quite a bit of time talking about VGC, in that we're going to pivot not just to a different competitive format, but like a different game entirely. Jake, for those of you that follow him on Twitter, is a very prominent Go player at the time, or at this time, not the time, this time.
At the time of recording.
So maybe it'll change by tomorrow.
Yeah, I quit.
But has had some success recently. So this week we are bringing on Blake Hopper, who is our first repeat guest. So that's kind of a dubious distinction. I don't know what that says about him or us. So we'll leave that for you to decide. But they are going to talk a little bit about competitive Pokemon Go. And I am like kind of a total novice in all this, so like I apologize in advance. We recorded it already, and I'm just kind of like asking questions because I have no idea what's going on. I'm just trying to like get any sort of a foothold. But it was kind of a cool discussion, so if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. We are going to take a break for just a couple seconds, and then we will be back with Blake in tow. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for sticking with us. We are now joined by our guest for this episode, and it's somebody that, for the first time ever, you might already know from this podcast, as we are joined by our first repeat guest ever, Mr. Blake Hopper. Blake, thanks for joining us.
First time ever, wow. I'm honored, hello.
Setting records every
first
day.
Repeat guest. Except
That's
for
crazy.
The fact that I've had to have Jake on every time we record an episode. You are like the first person to ever be brought back. Yeah, so.
Yikes. It's fine. I'll just edit you out of this one. How about that?
Wow.
Have fun talking to yourself. There's going to be blank periods, and then Jake's going to be like, yeah, you know what? That's a great point. So anyway, our topic this week, and, I think you'll see, why we decided to go back to Blake for a second time is something that really, there's only maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 people in the entire world that can speak knowledgeably about both the VGC circuit and the competitive Pokemon Go circuit. And Jake and Blake are kind of both at the height of their powers, as it were, right now, having both recently
we grow stronger every day.
won regional championships in the Pokemon Go competitive scene, and Jake was also recently featured on some I don't know, you could probably explain what that Twitch channel is a little bit better than I could, because I was just kind of an uninitiated person spamming Major Bowman PogChamp in the chat.
Yeah, they just brought together a bunch of people that had won regionals for a showcase thing. It wasn't for anything. It was entirely unofficial. There was no ranking or invitations at stake or anything, but it was just for fun. And I happened to get second in the one I played in, which was pretty cool. I got to play against, I guess there were 10 in mine, so I got to play against 9 other people that had won their regional. I got to play and beat the number 4 and 7 ranked players in the world, which is kind of fun.
It's kind of a bummer that doesn't contribute to your ranking at all.
I wish it did. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Just,
that would have been so big.
I know.
Or something like that.
I played the number 9 for like a different unofficial tournament yesterday and won that too. So again, I win when it doesn't matter apparently.
I guess that's one way to interpret it. But anyway, we wanted to take the opportunity this week to try and, kind of talk about some of the other competitive Pokemon scenes that are out there. They're both kind of still sort of hanging in there, given the state of the world right now. So it's kind of an interesting opportunity. We've got kind of 2 embedded experts to talk about it. So Jake, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so like Brendan said, Blake and I are both pretty huge into the Pokemon Go PvP tournament scene. There's a kind of a similar circuit than what we might be used to in VGC, but it's not run by Nintendo or by Pokemon or Niantic or whoever like the VGC circuit is. The main circuit is through a organization called Sylph. You might have seen them called the Sylph Road. That's kind of the more casual side, like the sect that goes hard into like raid research and mechanics and that kind of thing. And then they created the Sylph Arena, which is what they use to organize tournaments. They come up with new tournaments structures every month, and they have this whole, locals into regionals into worlds and stuff kind of circuit. But I don't want to take everything away from Blake here. Blake is the one that kind of got me back into it. I played like 1 or 2 of their like super early formats and then stopped because I didn't really want to spend all my dust on it. And then Blake got into it with another friend of ours, Nico, Calm Lava, Nico Villalobos. So Blake, tell us a little bit about what got you interested in like Pokemon Go PvP specifically.
Well, there were always talks whenever I started picking the game back up. For reference, I picked the game back up in, I want to say, what year did Community Day start? Was it 2018?
Yeah, it was.
That sounds right.
Okay, then I started back up with the game since 2016 in mid 2018 for Charmander Community Day.
Okay.
And even back then there were talks about PvP, when to start the PvP mechanic.
Right.
And that came late 2019. So I had always kind of dabbled in it because...
it was 2018 still.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, because it was my first year of grad school.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. They had Sylph had an entire circuit through 2018.
Yeah,
what am I thinking? But yeah, it dropped 2018. So of course I dabbled with that, and then I had always looked at the Sylph Road because I really wanted to know more of the intricacies of the game, even at its core, like with the raids, catching, shiny raids, all that fun stuff. But then they started talking about having their own competitive league, so I started looking at that and tried their first cup, the Boulder Cup, which was one of the first themed cup that they did. And yeah, the rest is kind of history on that one.
So speaking of these themed cups, like I think I mentioned it briefly, but every month they come up with a new like theme for their tournaments, and essentially it's just an entirely new like rule set or like ban list. If you like, you compare it kind of to like the series for VGC or like the yearly formats, but it's really more like it's much more specific than that, because like the thing they usually do is they'll pick like 4 or 5 types and say Pokemon of only these types are legal, and they might make some other bans like Tropius is usually banned in formats where it would be legal. Azumarill used to be the same way, but it's cool because it like rotates through Pokemon that are legal and Pokemon that are like good within these cups. So you like get to use a lot of different Pokemon every month, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, I really liked that aspect of Sylph because they sort of force different metas every single month. So sometimes you really never know what Pokemon you're going to end up using.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it is they artificially sort of force type imbalances and balance, however you want to consider it. Because like with the first one that I did, like I mentioned, Boulder, the only types that were allowed were Steel, Rock, Ground, and Fighting. And so obviously Fighting has the advantage over Rock and Steel, so you kind of have to build your team to counter the Fighting types, but you still want to use the Fighting types. So they kind of, force different ways to interact with those Pokemon every month. And then I think the next one had fighting, fairy, dark, and psychic. So it still had the fighting, but they're interacting with the other types in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes they do entirely
fun.
different stuff too. Like Ferocious was the first one I played after I came back, and that one was, what was it? It was like Pokemon that walked on 4 legs or had 2 legs and a tail or something like that.
Yeah,
it was like
that one was wild.
They do some like conceptual ones where like Ferocious is meant to be like beasts and like jungle animals and like things that would be like wild. Fighting each other. It was really cool. So like they get really creative, and there really haven't been many cups that like are functionally similar to each. Like there obviously there are some similarities between some. I think like Nightmare and Sinister you could probably draw some comparisons between, but like for the most part you're not going to have the same group of Pokemon at the top of each cup, which is really fun.
Right.
Do you guys find like there's like a burden as far as preparing Pokemon for such like a rapidly changing meta? Because I feel like that was one of the things that like initially kind of turned me off to the game, is that I felt like I was sinking all these hours into it, and then I was still like always out of dust, and I was like, oh great, now I have this Azumarill that I can use in competitive, but I have like empty stores of everything that I've ever owned in this entire game.
The short answer is yes. Like you're absolutely right. I think if you're a PvP player, if you're a serious PvP player, that you kind of accept the fact that you have to grind Stardust a decent amount, because that is certainly a bit of a limiting factor. Like there have been multiple times where I've dropped below like 100,000 dust because I was powering up stuff for like Sylph Cups, and like that's not really a place you want to be. I don't mind going there if I know I'm going to use the Pokemon, and I don't think I've powered up a Pokemon I regret other than Tentacruel for Timeless, but we all have our misses. It's fine.
Sure do. Yeah, the powering up is definitely the biggest concern and the biggest sort of entry price for PvP, because it's definitely a lot. At least with Sylph. With Sylph, right. You're having to power up so much stuff at the very start. For reference, I did that January Cup and then just sort of stopped playing for 8. So then I started back in September, and I've been playing since then. It's now May of 2020. So it's now that I'm at this point, I feel like I have almost every Pokemon I could need.
Right.
So I've been powering stuff up. At first, it was awful. I hated it. I had to power up so much stuff. But then after I powered up most of the really top tier Pokemon, at that point I had a good bulk of it, and I was just like, Pokemon here, Pokemon there, 5 Pokemon here. Sometimes you still have to power up a lot.
Yeah.
What can I say? But
you do reach kind of some critical mass where like I don't think for the past 2 or 3 cups I don't think I've had to power up any more than like 3 Pokemon for a team. Because like the top tier mons in one cup, if they're legal for a different one, are likely still going to be top tier. So like you're gonna have some overlap, but again, like for this, the current meta is called Forest Cup, and it's like grass, bug, electric, water. What's the last one? There's one more. Fire. It's not fire. It's fire. Yeah, it's fire.
Yeah, it's fire.
And I powered up a Heracross for this one because I hadn't used it yet, but like that's about it. Oh, and Ferrothorn, but Ferrothorn's entirely new anyway, so.
Gotcha.
I mean, so there were 3 for this one at least, but it's fine.
Yeah, so you kind of answered what my next question was going to be, in that as far as like preparing Pokemon for VGC, throwing out the whole like genning argument, the barrier to entry for like preparation of Pokemon, you basically do get to a point kind of like where you guys were saying, where you have if not at least the competitive Pokemon to make up your team, you have like a whole bunch of Dittos, or like you have a whole bunch of Pokemon from one egg group where you can pump out teams pretty quickly. As far as like staying within the realm of the meta once you've done a certain amount of breeding.
Yeah, and especially
so I guess it's similar in that aspect.
It's a little bit better in that aspect for Go too, because you don't have to worry about things like EVs. Like once you make a Pokemon in Go, you have it, and the only thing you might have to change is the moves. But if you're playing Go Battle League, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, you have an excess of TMs at this point. Because the Go Battle League, one of the things that it has done very well is make TMs way more accessible.
Oh, okay.
Like
when I played, TMs were a big issue.
Oh yeah, like I'm currently sitting at 92 charge TMs, and that's low.
Yep. Yeah, for real. I think I'm at 70.
Yeah. So like that's no longer an issue for me, which is really nice. It's like even something like Hypno, which has like 7 or 8 charge moves, it's ridiculous. I've changed my Hypno moveset like 3 or 4 times, and I'm still this high. So like, it's fine.
Yeah. The nice thing about Go Battle League 2 is that it not only prepares you for TM bulk, but just PvP in general.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a lot more Stardust than just going out and catching 100 Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah, you're getting a lot more Stardust from Go Battle League. Based on how much time you're spending on it.
Yeah. Gotcha. So they've at least made an effort to kind of correct some of those limitations.
For sure.
Very much present in early PvP, although I guess that was before there was kind of like a circuit that everybody was preparing for, and it was like, oh, you got to do your 3 battles a day to get, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, like the trainer battles for the rewards or whatever.
Right.
Right.
I guess that's a pretty good segue, though, if we're going to kind of start talking about Go Battle League. Blake, I'll let you take this one. Kind of explain the difference between like these Self Cups and what Go Battle League is.
Oh, yeah, for sure. As we mentioned, the self stuff is all themed and meta shifting oriented, but Go Battle League is relatively stagnant. It's every single Pokemon allowed under certain thresholds for the different leagues. So there's Great League, Ultra League, and Master League. Great League has a CP threshold of 1500. Ultra League has a CP threshold of 2500. And Master League is no limits. Everything goes, basically. And the nice thing about Go Battle League is, honestly, the Pokemon are kind of broad. You can kind of power up 2 teams worth and you'll be good. But yeah, it's definitely made PvP much more accessible for the average Joe than, say, your hardcore players. I don't even consider myself like a hardcore grinder in terms of XP and dust. Well, dust I kind of have to be now, but not nearly as hardcore as some others. And yeah, it definitely makes PvP much more accessible, which is really nice.
I think so. Is that like the equivalent of like the battle spot ladder?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yes.
It's basically
yeah.
What Go Battle League is like structurally is it's just an option like in the Pokemon Go game itself. Like you can open the menu, and then now there's an option for battle, and you just click that. You can like pick the basic track or the premium track. You can use like a premium raid pass on it, and get the only difference is better rewards. But you get 5 battles for each like set, and you get 5 sets a day. So essentially, you get 25 free battles a day, and it's a really good way to like actually play PvP without having to seek out people to play with. It's just random matchmaking online. It's very similar. It's rated very similarly to something like Pokemon Showdown, where you have like your ELO rating. If you win, it goes up. If you lose, it goes down. You can progress through like different ranks. So like the highest rank is rank 10, and you have to be at 3000 ELO to reach that. And there are different ranks below that. I think rank 9 was 2500, 8 was 2000, and then everything else was kind of win based instead of rating based before that. So it's cool if you like want to do PvP without having to like play all these specialized self metas, because you can just kind of open the app, plug in your team, and go.
Gotcha. So if we're kind of comparing the sort of structure that's been created, it seems like one of the and mind to the viewership here, I'm like learning about this basically as we go here. I'm like this is an educational seminar for me, so I'm gonna hopefully ask questions on behalf of like the VGC community. So it seems like the kind of interesting quirk to the circuit is that basically like the equivalent of our IRL circuit that's run by TPCI is like fan run, and that you're like in-person locals and in-person regionals, and then I guess these notes say that there's like a continental/world championship as well, are not put on officially by any sort of like affiliated agency. It's all fan made, so to speak.
Yeah, Self has no official ties to like Pokemon or Niantic or Nintendo or any of the. Niantic is the group that develops the app itself, just for reference. But they have no like official ties or sponsorships or anything. I know that like Niantic is aware of them and like doesn't mind. Like they're not gonna like send them a C&D or anything. But
that's nice of them.
Yeah, yeah. Least they can do.
It's like how we allow Showdown to exist.
Pretty much, yeah.
It really shouldn't.
It's more akin to like Smash Bros. If you think about it, not in the sense of like the circuit itself, but like every major tournament and like any semblance of a circuit is entirely grassroots. So that's how Self is as well.
Gotcha. I guess that's a little different though, in the sense that Smash is kind of embedded in like a larger fighting game world,
that's
where
true,
like all these large large open entry tournaments are all. There's like 10 fighting games that happen there, and Smash is always going to be one of them. But people actually have to like go out of their way to set this like these Go tournaments apart from or organize them individually.
I guess there's like really no genre that Go fits into, right?
Right. No, it's kind of like a game alone. So one of the things that's similar, but I guess is also a little different, so I'll allow you guys to speak to this, is that in the Self circuit, there's like a qualification system. So in that sense, it's similar to VGC, but the qualification system is much different.
Yeah, Blake, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Normally, the Self structure is just you play in your tournaments for the month, and you accumulate rank points, and you get placed on the leaderboards. And as your rank goes up, your spot on the leaderboards goes up, obviously. But then they also have regional tournaments and continental tournaments, where, first of all, just to even play in the regional, you have to qualify for it. And that can be done in many ways. You can qualify for a regional tournament by either winning a tournament that is 6 rounds or larger. So I believe that is a 33-person tournament.
Yeah.
At least for 6 rounds, yeah. So you can win a 6-round or larger tournament. You can, I think the cutoff was like, it was really large this time.
Yeah.
For the global rating point, I think you had to be like top 10,000 or top 5,000 in the world to get an invitation to a regional. I think there's one more.
You can like top a local leaderboard or something like that.
That's right. Yeah. Top a local leaderboard, which you can climb by playing in multiple tournaments hosted by one tournament organizer. Yeah. And then once you play in this regional, or regionals also, if you win it, you get an invitation to continentals. However, the continental invitationals are pretty scarce. Only like 1 or 2 people per regional will get an invitation. Usually it's just one, but 6 or more rounds, you start accumulating more and more invites from each regional.
Yeah, it's like, for example, your regional had 6 rounds, so you had 2 invites come out of yours. But mine only had 5, so there's just the one.
Yeah.
So as a quick aside, before I let you go on, as far as the tournament itself structure, is it just like Swiss with Top Cut, or
that's a good question. It is Swiss, and that's it for the most part.
Yep.
Okay.
So regionals is the exception. Usually every tournament they just play Swiss, and then your record at the end of Swiss is just it. If there's one person that's XO, they win. If there's like multiple people that if there's no XO, all the X1s are considered like co-winners. For regionals specifically, they did do what we know as a top cut, just because they did have the one invite per regional kind of thing going on.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, they won't play that kind of top cut out. They'll just end the tournament at the end of Swiss.
Okay. All right. Sorry to interrupt, Blake. So we're at continentals. So you get 1 to 2 invites per regional, and then what happens? What happens then?
Well, all of the people per continent, I believe, go to their continental, and you can only go if you've won a regional on that continent, I guess. And you go and compete at the continental, and it's I think they have 3 continentals. In the past, they've done it at each Go Fest. I believe they had 3.
Yeah.
So they had one in Chicago, Dortmund, and
Santiago is the 3rd one.
Oh, it was Santiago, really?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't. Cool. It wasn't a Japanese one.
No, I know. I was looking up info on last year's Continentals earlier today, and Chicago, Dortmund, Santiago is something that I saw pop up in multiple places.
Interesting.
There could be more. I might be wrong, but I did think it was weird that there was no East Asian regional at all, because I know there's a big...
Yeah, because they had a Go Fest, if I recall correctly.
Oh, yeah, Yokohama, right?
Yokohama, yeah. I was going to say that. That was the word that was coming to my head, but I didn't want it. But I guess it's kind of similar to VGC in that sense, where like the Eastern Circuit just stays bad. All right, so I want to change gears a little bit. So as far as so we've kind of established what the circuit kind of looks like, I think, right? We captured kind of the main points of it.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as like team building and going ahead and playing the game, obviously like the type chart is still the same, although like immunities don't exist in Go. So what sort of things as far as like the way that the game is made, I guess, inform your team building, and then like the way that you go about, like approaching competitive?
That's tough, because
the big thing with Pokemon Go compared to VGC is the way moves work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would say that's the biggest difference, because obviously with VGC you have your 2v2, your 4v4, 2 Pokemon on each side, 4 Pokemon on the field, turn based.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there are many elements of that. Everyone listening to this most likely knows about that. But with Pokemon Go, you have they split it into like turns, so it's more digestible. But really, it's just in terms of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a fast move, and you have 2 charge moves.
Mm-hmm.
And your fast move accumulates energy, and your energy builds your charge moves.
Mm-hmm.
And some fast moves are damage-oriented, energy-oriented. And so some fast moves you're just using to do damage. Some fast moves you're using to charge your charge moves really, really quickly, because your charge moves are good. And so you have to really consider all of the different fast moves, all the different charge move combinations,
mm-hmm.
Whenever you're building your team, on top of what Pokemon do I want to use to have good type matchups versus what my opponent's likely going to have.
Okay, so let me stop you real quick, and I just want to like step back just a minute, because I realized that in asking the question about team building, I've neglected some very important things to build.
Yeah, there's a lot to explain.
So let's start with this. In Pokemon Go, what makes a Pokemon good?
Yeah.
Let's start there. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, and again, that goes mostly to the moves.
There really is.
Yeah. Yeah, like really just the moves. And a big thing with moves, since you only have 2 charge moves, the big thing is type coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll have Pokemon that are just really, really strong. Like in my opinion, the perfect example is Haunter.
Yeah.
Haunter is not something you would ever expect to see in VGC. That thing is terrible. But in Pokemon Go, it's really, really attack oriented, very, very strong, and it only uses ghost moves.
Mm-hmm.
It only has ghost moves. But then there are some Pokemon like Shiftry or Azumarill, where they're just using stab moves, but their stab moves cover a lot of different options. So you have Azumarill, you have Fairy, Water, and then it also gets Ice Beam, so it can cover grass weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another element to consider of what makes Pokemon good. Can it even cover its own weaknesses? Those typically end up being favored in team building.
I think the main thing you could boil it down to is how threatening you could be against a wide range of Pokemon. So something like Azumarill, like Blake said, I think is a great example, because Bubble is a relatively quick energy generating move. Ice Beam is a really good move. Hydro Pump is really strong, and it's stab boosted. And then Play Rough is a really good option too. It's kind of in between Hydro Pump and Ice Beam power wise and energy wise, but it's just it's pretty consistent, like neutral damage against a lot of things. So it makes it a pretty good pick.
Okay, so let's take Azumarill as an example. So for VGC players, we know that like the combination of Fairy Water has historically been pretty good. Azumarill in the formats that it's legal, and then obviously Tapu Fini was really important. And even Primarina this year. And I guess it doesn't boil down only to typing. So let's assume that we're in a world where Water Fairy is good, which it is. So why is it that Azumarill is? I'm trying to think of how to best phrase this question. What is it about it in both scenarios that still allows it to kind of rise to the top, I guess?
In Azumarill's case, it's pretty bulky. It's like Azumarill is an example of a Pokemon that doesn't have a very high max CP. So in Azumarill's case, most of the good...
This is a whole nother can of worms.
Oh yeah, but in Azumarill's case, you almost have to max it out entirely, if not max it out entirely for some like IV spreads. So it's going to be at or near level 40, and if you're at the higher levels, you generally have higher bulk. So like Azumarill's pretty bulky. Like Blake was entirely right when he said that it usually just comes down to the moves. Azumarill just has access to like really good moves within Pokemon Go. Like there are a lot of moves that are good in like both Go and like the main games, and then there are some that are like way better in Go like than in the main games. Like Bubble is an example. Bubble's pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
And like in Azumarill's case, you have like you do some pretty good damage. You have a pretty consistent like charge move output, and I think like the combination of all those things makes Azumarill specifically pretty good.
Okay, so let's talk about moves for a minute.
Yeah.
So I know that this is like a little bit different in that the move pool, like the number of moves in the game, first of all, is much smaller, and then the number of moves that each of these Pokemon get is much smaller. And also, it's my understanding that like a move is just kind of like universally like a move is just good, and like if a certain Pokemon has a move, that it's much more likely to be good, which is not the case in like the main series games where you know, we can give like just like Azumarill, for example. Hydro Pump is a good move on a lot of Pokemon. It does a lot of damage. It's a strong water type move. But in VGC or like the main series competitive Pokemon, Hydro Pump doesn't matter to Azumarill at all competitively.
Right.
So in that sense, like the moves are very different than they are in Go.
Yeah, so like in Go, there's really no like one main difference is there's no like physical or special. There's no delineation there. There's
Okay. So that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, there's just regular attack and defense and HP.
And then the distribution is very important.
Yeah.
And then I guess I didn't make my point very well in that like moves are much more objectively good in Go than they are in VGC, whereas they're more conditional.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
Okay.
Like you can tackle that one if you want.
I think like the best example and this a best example of that, and this might surprise some of the VGC folks, is the move Counter.
I'm ready to be surprised. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you played Pokemon Go, like even raids, like you probably have heard how good Counter is. It's just a really strong, good energy building fast move, and any Pokemon that has it is viable
for the most part. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, and like not necessarily viable in Open Great League, like with everything viable, but like if you have like a rock type meta where fighting types aren't allowed, you could use a Sudowoodo with Counter, and suddenly it's beating up all the rock types, you know?
Vigoroth is viable like solely because it has access to
Vigoroth,
Counter,
for sure. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, even that kind of brings up an example of how even some moves in Pokemon Go don't function like main series games do. Like Counter obviously is like a very special move in Pokemon. You take physical damage, you counter back with double damage. But with Pokemon Go, it's just a fast move. You're just punching things. You don't care.
Charm's another good example too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is Charm was another one that I was thinking of.
Charm is like one of the strongest moves in the game, like numbers wise, just in terms of damage. And it just doesn't even do damage in the main series games.
They had to make sure that fairy types were still borked. Fairy types are like the pet project for all.
Well, it's funny because Charm originally...
We must make sure fairies are good.
Yeah. Charm originally wasn't even in Go, and there was no fairy fast type move, or no fairy type fast move. And so most of the other, like, even something like Draining Kiss, they made a charge move, so there really weren't many options. And I think the options left were like Fairy Wind. I think that was the last one.
I think it's Fairy Wind.
But like the Fairy Wind distribution is pretty bad. Like in
I think even Disarming Voice is a charge move.
It is, yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is.
I think,
I know Xbloud has it.
Sadly.
Yeah, then they eventually made Charm into a fast move and gave it to most of the fairy types, like Gardevoir, Wigglytuff, Clefable, Togekiss, like the main ones you could think of. And they also decided to make it crazy good. So I was certainly not complaining when that happened.
To the surprise of nobody that's played the main series games, I guess fairy overlords are always going to be
fairy
relevant.
damage is good.
So it seems like we touched on moves, we touched on typing a little bit, and And then there are no abilities or anything in Go,
correct,
as far as I know, correct?
Yeah.
So that kind of leaves, and I know you guys both spoke about it a little bit, but obviously stats are still hugely important, right? So you can give a Pokemon, a lot of good moves, but it still has to have relevant stats to participate. What is like the carryover between VGC and Go like as far as stats?
The stats in Go are calculated based on stats in the main games.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
I think I knew that.
So like attack is the average of attack and special attack. Defense is defense and special defense. And I want to say speed factors into HP, but I actually don't know.
Speed factors into attack and defense, actually. I'm not sure about... I think HP is actually just doubled.
Got it.
The base HP in the main games is just doubled for the base HP.
Yeah. But yeah, so the stats translate well. They're calculated based on the main game stats.
Yeah, so I guess at least relatively well, unless you kind of have like a one-sided, like something like Rampardos, I guess is the best thing I can think of, where like if you have a really high attack stat and a bad special attack stat, that you kind of lose out in the transition.
It's actually a weighted average. Blake and I were talking about this the other day in a different server. I think it weights the higher of the two by 7/8.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
And then the lower by 1/8. So like Rampardos is actually a good example because it's one of those. It's one of the Pokemon with the highest DPS in the game.
It's absurdly strong.
Yeah, specifically for rating, it's like I think it's the highest rock type DPS out there. And it beats out stuff like Rhyperior, Tyranitar. But that's because it has that super high attack and it doesn't get bogged down by the low special attack.
Okay, cool. All right, so the like what makes a Pokemon good is very similar in both scenarios. It's just kind of like the way the numbers work out, and then I guess some of the move distribution changes. So you still you need to have your stats, and then you need to have your typing, and then you need to have like the moves that you need to succeed. So I guess that works kind of in both ways, and the only kind of difference that I can think of immediately is that obviously abilities play a huge role in VGC, but there's enough carryover that I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I really do think the move distribution is the big thing, though. Like you can have all the stats you want, you can have a great typing, but if you don't have access to like the moves that are good in Go, you're just kind of SOL. Like you can one example is Palkia. Palkia, in theory, is okay because it can stand up pretty well against some of the threats in Master League, but it just has terrible charge moves, and that alone makes it almost impossible to use well, just because if you're not making the most use of those moves, you're just going to lose. And the fact that some moves, I think you mentioned this, Brendan, some moves are just objectively good in Go in any scenario, whereas it's much more situational in VGC. Like if you have access to those moves that are very good always, you're going to have a leg up.
Right. Okay. I just had another thing that I was thinking of, and now I can't think of it. Anyway, we'll move on from there. So anyway, now that we've kind of established what makes a Pokemon good in both, and we have an idea of that, let's talk about what some of like the carryover as far as specific Pokemon that work in both, and then why that is. I think we have a little bit of a list here that we've sort of prepared.
Yeah, off the top of my head.
So we've been talking about Azumarill, so I guess we can start there.
I think we've talked about it enough. Azumarill is just broken.
Yeah.
One of the
something that's interesting about Pokemon Go is bulk is very favored, and the main reason for that is, as I mentioned, like fast moves are just constantly doing damage to one another. And if you have good bulk, you're just taking them like a champ. Even some of the charge moves, since they're larger hits, you take out percentages of those. So Pokemon with pretty good bulk transition well from main series to Pokemon Go. Like Azumarill, which might not seem too surprising, or might seem kind of surprising. But also, part of what factors into bulk is lack of attack. And that has
I see.
Yeah, that has to do with the way Pokemon Go calculates its CP.
Yeah.
Where attack is more favored in terms of your overall CP. And as I mentioned, the Great League, Ultra League, and Master League have CP thresholds. So if you're able to, I think Jake mentioned this actually, if you're able to get to a higher level, you generally have more bulk. So with Azumarill, its attack in the main series is supplemented by huge power. Yeah, so it actually has a really terrible attack stat. I think it's like base 50 or 60.
I think it's 50, yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. But with huge power, obviously, viable. But in Pokemon Go, that just makes it, like if you're looking at it from the standard of rating, an awful Pokemon. But then you put it into PvP, where it has good moves that do good damage. It can take a hit like no other. And yeah, it's a monster.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this, is that there's kind of this threshold, right? And there's a lot of things that go into boosting your CP, but you want to stay under the threshold and still maximize the amount of stats.
Yeah, so
but the way that it's calculated is that it's so heavily attack weighted that if you have low attack and good everything else, you can get more like total stats under the threshold.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's exactly
it,
yeah.
Exactly.
The thing that people use to determine like how good a Pokemon is as far as its like PvP IV spread goes is called stat product. And that's basically just a measure of how many stats you have. Like if you have higher overall stats, your stat product is going to be higher. And if you think about it in terms of even just like adjusting IVs on the same Pokemon, if you took a Pokemon that had, just say for example, like 10, 10, 10 IVs in all three stats, if you increase attack to 11, your CP goes up higher than if you were to increase HP or defense.
Gotcha.
So that's just kind of another way to visualize like how attack is weighted higher.
Right. So that in that sense, so Blake did a good job of explaining it then in like exactly why Azumarill is so good. Like in comparison, because obviously we know it in VGC, the reason that it's good, well, the only reason that we even touch it or accept it as a Pokemon is that it has huge power and obviously the combination of Belly Drum and Aqua Jet, but none of those things are present at all in Go.
Well, Aqua Jet is.
So it just kind of like coincidentally, Aqua Jet's in the game, it is?
Yeah, but it's bad.
Okay. So it just kind of like coincidentally like takes advantage of an entirely different like set of values to make itself good in both settings. That's so interesting.
Right.
And then the next Pokemon that we kind of have on the list here as far as Pokemon that are good at both is Cresselia, which is just like a huge defensive stat ball in both games. So you like that, the carryover in between what makes the Pokemon good in both games makes a lot more sense to me as far as like in the context of Cresselia than it does in the context of Azumarill.
Yeah,
for sure. And also something else with Cresselia is, once again, it has good moves in the scope of Go. And yeah, even Cresselia is a Pokemon that generally actually has to get to doesn't have to get to a high level to have to be at 1500. But since its base defense is just so massive, it's still really bulky even at a low level at 1500. Whereas Azumarill, obviously, it's not a legendary Pokemon. It's I don't even know, a low route Pokemon.
It's like a route.
So in order to match Cresselia, it has to be high level and stuff.
Right.
I think the last one on our list now is Togekiss, which, like, I think Togekiss is a really good example of the move making the Pokemon. Just because kind of before,
and then it goes back to Charm.
Yeah, exactly. Before Charm was released, Togekiss was terrible. Like, it was not viable at all in any league.
Poor thing.
And then they gave it Charm, and then it became a staple in Ultra League and Master League specifically. It's still not super great in Great League because there are better Charm users. But Togekiss is like top tier in Ultra and Master League just because Charm does so much damage. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of dragons.
Yeah, true.
As well.
And then like Togekiss doesn't even have great charge moves either. Like its charge moves are very mediocre. But like
they're just okay.
Charm itself is just stupid. So that's what makes it good.
For sure.
All right, so the next thing we wanted to touch on was some of the Pokemon. We'll do Good and Go and Good and VGC kind of separately, but I'm going to start with the Good and VGC just because there's, like, based on what we've just learned, and specifically as it pertains to Azumarill, one of the Pokemon that we talked about before this that was good in VGC but not in Go is Amoonguss.
Yeah.
Now, Amoonguss is a Pokemon that, like, based on a lot of the criteria that we just established for Azumarill, as far as, like, being a good Pokemon in Go, you would think that, you know, having a low attack stat and having a high HP, you know, it should be like a bulky Pokemon that should, you know, I guess at least somewhat in comparison to Azumarill, at least sort of function and Go, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with Amoonguss, it comes down to the moves with Amoonguss.
Okay, it has the moves.
Gotcha. I believe that the stats on Amoonguss are there. Like, it's nothing, it's not like the bulkiest Pokemon, it's not the strongest Pokemon attack-wise, but it just does not have the moves.
Yeah.
Like, I think actually its fast move pool, realistically, from the main series games, is actually shooting its foot in Pokemon Go.
Right.
Because it can't learn any of the good grass fast moves.
Or even poison.
Or or even poison. I think, really with poison, it's like Poison Jab in Pokemon Go. That's pretty really much. Good. But
does it not get that?
No. And like the good fast moves for grass are Razor Leaf and Vine Whip, and it doesn't get either of those. And
doesn't have leaves or vines.
Does it get Bullet Seed?
I don't think so, because mushrooms don't have seeds. I don't think it would. Yeah. But like that means it's left with
too much logic to the things that learn moves here, Jake.
But that means it's left with like Feint Attack and Astonish, I think, are its fast moves.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, they're bad.
So it doesn't even get a they're same type attack bonus in this.
Yeah,
game,
it's not
correct?
It's not 50%, but it's there.
Figured I should ask. It's there.
20%, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
It has okay charge moves. Like Grass Knot and Foul Play are both decent. But
yeah, it's just the fast moves just not nothing.
So another thing that we have on this list, and this is another kind of interesting one, in that we've already established that not fully evolved ghost types are viable. In the context of Haunter, but Dusclops is not good. Does that fall into like the move scenario as well? Obviously, like Eviolite is a big piece of its presence in VGC, which doesn't exist in Go. But is there something else that's holding Dusclops back?
I think it's still the moves, honestly.
Okay, moves. Moves. Mm-hmm.
It has like okay moves.
It has okay moves. It has okay, and the thing about Dusclops is it's been good in a singular Sylph theme cup.
Okay.
Where it was like all ghost and it was the only bulky ghost. And it has kind of weak charge moves. Normally ghost really like the charge move Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball scales absurdly well into Pokemon Go. I don't know why, but it's really strong for how much energy it requires. And it doesn't have it. It has like Shadow Punch, which is very
definitely
weak, but it charges
Shadow Ball too.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, they just didn't give it to. Honestly, if Dusclops got Shadow Ball, I don't want to know what would happen. It would probably be really good.
That's so crazy to me to think about how like impactful it is what moves they learn. But I guess that's kind of like the whole thing. Part of the whole thing is what moves they learn.
It's interesting to compare it to Cress and Go 2 pretty well because they're both like bulky. For the most part, Cress is using Psycho Cut over Confusion, I think, in Great League at least. And so like Psycho Cut and Hex, which Dusclops uses, are similar moves in that they have super high energy gain, but they're not very strong. But Cress backs it up with like Future Sight, which is a really powerful move. Whereas Dusclops, like Blake said, has Shadow Punch.
Shadow Punch, not good even in the main series games. All right, so to change gears then, and we'll kind of talk about this last kind of like good in VGC, not in Go, before we change gears a little bit. One of the examples that you guys have here is Tyranitar, which is a little bit different. You know, Amoonguss and Dusclops both are like these high HP or high bulk Pokemon. Tyranitar is a pseudo legend that has high everything, unique typing, and obviously it doesn't get Sandstream, but it has like move pool for days. So what is it about Tyranitar specifically that doesn't allow it to translate into competitive Go?
I think
like the main thing honestly is he does have pseudo bulk in the main series with Sandstorm. And he has a lot of weaknesses.
He does.
Yeah. Jake, if you want to add.
Well, I was gonna say I think it's different for which league you're talking about, because in Great League, it's one of those examples where it has to be a super low level to be under 1500, and so its bulk is like not there. It's like we know it is a pretty bulky Pokemon in VGC, but in Go, it just really doesn't live up to that, and it's weak to a lot of the common types. Like Counter is a common move, and you just get obliterated by Counter. Like you're weak to Charm, you're weak to Ground, Water, Grass, which are all good types. So it struggles there. And then like you do have the bulk in the upper leagues. Like in Master League, it's one of the highest CP Pokemon in the game. And so like you're going to have good stats, but like it doesn't stack up well against a lot of the good Pokemon there. Something like Dialga, you just kind of get shredded by, like even your matchups against like the ghosts like Giratina are less good than you might have hoped that they would be.
You would think it could at least do that.
Yeah, I mean, like it beats them, but not like not bad enough that it's good, like worth using, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it has good moves too. Like its move pool isn't
also
terrible.
It can't Dynamax or hold weakness
That's true.
policy.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Imagine if you could weakness policy and go.
Oh, imagine if you could Dynamax.
Oh no, let's not imagine that.
Yeah.
All right, so the last sort of category in our Venn diagram here is good in Go and not in VGC.
I'm
kind of looking at this list a little bit, and I'm kind of blown away by the names that I'm seeing here. So I don't even really know how to like sort of initiate this conversation.
This is like my favorite conversation to have with anyone that doesn't know anything about like Pokemon Go, because you can just walk up and say, "Hey, Bastiodon's a top tier Pokemon," and they would just laugh in your face, and you'd just be like, "Well, I know it is."
Okay, so like I kind of like sort of understand that and what we've talked about as far as like bulk goes already, but I guess like Altaria, like what does it have going for
Dragon Breath?
It? Because
that's Dragon Breath.
Oh, okay, so that's like an example of Pokemon that capitalizes heavily on its move pool, because it doesn't have like stats to really write home about.
Yeah.
The bulk scales really well in Pokemon Go.
Oh, does it?
For some reason.
Okay.
Yeah, it has decent bulk, but like Dragon Breath makes Altaria. Like specifically Dragon Breath Sky Attack.
For sure.
Like that combo is just super good. Yep. Dragon Breath is a really fast move, meaning that you use it more often. Like what the duration of one Sky Attack is not Sky Attack. The duration of one Dragon Breath is shorter on average than something like Charm, so you get more of them in at a time. And it does a lot of damage. It has decent energy gain, and the Sky Attack is a really low cost charge move. And so having the combination of those two makes it like you run Dragon Pulse as the second move, but you almost never click it just because Sky Attack is way better.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Stunfisk is a Pokemon that I know is very near and dear to your two hearts right now. And that's kind of one that I guess I sort of understand, because I think theoretically, like even if you were to close your eyes and not look at its stats or move pool, like electric ground like strikes you as a typing that would be pretty good. Like all else equal. But then you kind of lose it when you start to look at its stats in VGC, at least, and that it doesn't really have any abilities that it wants, and that's where it kind of goes away. So what is saving it? And I think even in Go it's kind of niche, right? This is kind of like a U2 specific tech Pokemon.
It's been
to an extent, yeah.
It's been
Stunfisk.
Go ahead, sorry.
Is So with Stunfisk, it's really interesting because it is kind of niche, but the reason it's niche is because it beats a lot of the really popular Pokemon. And not only popular, but like objectively just good Pokemon. Like Steel type Pokemon are very good in Pokemon Go. No surprise, because they have a whole bunch of resistances, very few weaknesses. But Stunfisk is able to just walk in and be like, "Hey, what's up? We're throwing down." He just throws in some ground moves, and he's just chunking away at them. It's kind of bulky too, kind of like Altaria. Like the bulk in the main series games with Altaria and Stunfisk, not crazy. They're not known for their bulk. They're really not known for anything, honestly. But in Pokemon Go, they like both of them, Stunfisk especially, like pretty thick. He's got some good stats.
He's thick.
And kind of like I was touching on with Dusclops, how its charge moves aren't that great. Stunfisks are just okay, like in terms of damage, but they charge really quickly. So the fact that they charge quickly and he's bulky, he can throw out a whole bunch, just kind of bombard your opponent.
You make up for a lack of power on one by throwing three in the time that other people can throw like one or two. So it's really cool. It's super spammy. And it's kind of been picking up recently. It hasn't been released for very long. It's only been out for like a month and a half or something like that.
It came out for April Fools.
Oh yeah, you're right. So April 1.
Oh, why'd they have to do Stunfisk like that?
It's like the camouflage Pokemon or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, Stunfisk.
We're just making fun of its face. That's better, at least.
No, it's fun. Like you kind of hinted at it. We both won a regional with Stunfisk, though. So I think we're both on the Stunfisk hype train. I think permanently.
All right, you got to flex. So take it in. So the next sort of like, I guess this is more of a category, is the starter Pokemon all find themselves being very good, which is kind of uncommon in VGC, and that like some of the only really common starter Pokemon we've seen are Charizard, and that was only because it got Megas and a unique Dynamax form, and like Venusaur I guess has always kind of been historically good, but past that like there's not really like an excellent history of starters being very good. So Is this because of the community day moves? Are those like that much better?
It's only because of the community day moves. They're pretty ridiculous. Like the starters all get Frenzy Plant, Hydro Cannon, Blast Burn for community day, obviously based on the types. And they decided
6 months ago we could have laughed at this, but we were actually seeing like Frenzy Plant and Blast Burn play in this format, which is funny.
But it's ridiculous how good they decided to make those moves. Like they're all super strong for like low cost relatively, and so the efficiency you get with those moves is just insane. And it makes Pokemon like Venusaur, Meganium. I think Venusaur, Meganium, Swampert, I would say are the top 3 starters. If you want to, but like it's stupid how good they are. All 3 of those have good fast moves too. Like the grasses both have Vine Whip. Swampert has Mud Shot, and so those are all like really high energy gaining moves. So it complements the charge moves super well, and they all have really good coverage too. Like Meganium has Earthquake, which is a very strong move and go. It's higher energy, but if you have Vine Whip, you're not taking too long to get there, and it complements Grass super well in terms of like typing, and so that specifically is why Meganium's good.
Meganium using Earthquake and is just kind of like mind blowing.
I know.
They can't really process that very well. And then the last thing on our list here is like some of the legendary Pokemon that kind of find their way into the forefront in ways that they don't necessarily in VGC. And obviously we only really like in VGC get the chance to take a look at some of these like legendary Pokemon every 3 years. We get the fun experience of I hate GS Cup. I honestly hate GS Cup.
I know.
But obviously in GS Cup, kind of like because these restricted Pokemon are kind of like so much in the limelight, you can very much kind of analyze which ones are good and which ones are not. Obviously, we've been dominated by Groudon for years and years and years at this point, but like you'll never see something like I don't know, like Zekrom seeing play other than like niche Kyogre counter. So okay, I'll step away. I talked too much already about the Pokemon that are good in like the legendary Pokemon that are bad in VGC but good in Go.
Yeah, Dialga and Giratina are yet again. I feel like it's a theme with Pokemon Go just because of the moves. Like,
okay.
Dialga has Dragon Breath. Dialga has Dragon Breath, as mentioned with Altaria. It's able to just pound out so much damage, and since it's like the legendary format, just naturally going to be a good amount of dragons running around. And Dialga, since it's part Steel, if there's another Dragon type using Dragon Breath, it's going to be neutral to Dialga, but Dialga's going to be doing super effective damage to that dragon. Dialga is considered the best legendary in Master League.
I think it's not even just the best legendary. I think it's just the best Pokemon.
I feel like I like actually like kind of understand that. Like that one's not as surprising to me. You know, like drawing from a knowledge of the main series games, in that Steel Dragon is ridiculous typing, like ridiculous as like even, and that the reason that we don't see Dialga in modern day GS Cup is because the format is owned by Xerneas and Groudon. Like if you take those 2 Pokemon away, Dialga is like instantly a top tier Pokemon. So I guess that kind of makes sense to me. But Giratina, I'm still very surprised to hear about.
Both forms are good too in different ways. Like
both forms are good too. It's not
just both forms are good.
Origin is the snake one, and it has Shadow Claw and Shadow Ball, which is what makes Haunter so good. So it's the same kind of principle there. It does a lot of damage. And then Altered Form is one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game. It's just super tanky. And it also has Shadow Claw. It has Dragon Breath too, both of which are good. I think usually we'd run Shadow Claw just because the energy gain is a lot better. And then kind of like Stunfisk, you have like super spammy but not super strong charge moves, like Dragon Claw, Shadow Sneak. And so you just kind of sit there. You absorb a lot of damage. You can chip away at stuff. It beats a lot of stuff one-on-one, which it makes it a pretty safe Pokemon to use.
That's crazy.
It's definitely a lot different.
Man, this is okay. I dabbled. I think I gave up Go like a couple months into competitive when I like burned out on grinding dust and stuff like that. So I was kind of like sort of like in touch with a lot of it, but it just like is a lot to sort of unpack. I'm probably not going to sleep tonight. Okay, well, I think this is really interesting. Obviously, I was directing the conversation and like asking a lot of questions that were more for me. So hopefully this was informative for the other people that were listening to this conversation. I think it's really interesting, and it's always kind of fun, especially if you're more of like a general fan of the franchise, to sort of check in on some of the other aspects of what's going on, at least competitively. Some people that play VGC are also in touch with singles, but this is kind of an entirely different realm. And if you're interested, I'm sure Jake and I could host an episode on Pokemon Masters if you want to, get into another side of the game, which is a game I've already spent entirely too much money on. But that's a story for another day. So that was a great conversation, and obviously I mentioned it a little bit, but these are kind of two of like the players on the forefront. Blake, are you elite still? I don't know how that works. Are you at the top?
I am.
Okay,
yeah,
so that's kind of we'll just talk about that. I'm just gonna give you the floor to flex for a minute, Jake. You don't get it this week.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I am on Sylph. They have a ranking system, and I'm at the tier called Elite, which at the moment is the highest tier that we know of. I think there's like one more, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think right now the threshold for Elite is top 300 in the world.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and Jake is really far behind, actually. He's like,
Jake, you suck.
I think he's like top 700 or something.
You said he isn't really far behind. I thought you said he is really far behind.
Yeah, I think you cut out.
Okay.
Oh, no, he's not.
No, I'm like
no, Jake's rating is pretty good.
I checked the other day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Jake actually missed out on a tournament in October, so he's like 1 month behind what most people are right now.
You fell off the snowball, Jake.
No, I just didn't jump on it early enough. That was the first. Exactly. That was the first month of the season, so I didn't start until month 2, essentially.
October, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's awesome. Anyway, if you have more questions, I'm sure Jake or Blake would be happy to talk about it on Twitter, so you can direct your questions there.
For sure.
But for now, we're gonna switch gears real quick to Jake's favorite part of the show. That I've actually prepared for this week.
Wow.
So I'm actually going to go ahead and seize the floor real quick. A lot of weeks, Jake's like, okay, now we're going to talk about music. And I really quick pop up in my Spotify, go to recently listened, and pull something real quick from there. But there's actually a couple artists that I've been listening to quite a bit this week that are kind of more in the electronic genre. I think one of the artists is one that some people are somewhat familiar with, which is the Nox, that have done kind of some collaborative stuff with some some bigger artists, and also have done kind of popular remixes of songs that were on the radio or something like that. And so that's a really cool group. And then the other group that I've been listening to is called Great Good Fine Okay, which I really like the name of. And they have a song that I've been listening to. It's called "Take It or Leave It." That's very popular, I guess, or relatively popular, given the stature of the group. That's really cool. So, if you're into some more electronic stuff for the week, there you go.
Mine is the new album from AWOL Nation, who is kind of an old name. If you know the song, I was gonna say, if you know the song "Sail," that's them, and that's a 10 to 15-year-old song at this point. But they've still been making music somewhat consistently. I saw them twice when I was in high school, which was pretty cool. I've been a fan for a little while now. And I named one of my Pokemon at my first World Championships in 2015 after one of their songs. So, just for some continuity there, I've kind of liked them for a long time now. But they made a new album in the last month or two. I forget the exact release date, but within the confines of our current quarantine, they have released a new album, and it's called Angel Miners and the Lightning Riders. And I think it's really cool. I've listened to it a lot. A couple of favorite songs are California, Halo Blue, and Pacific Coast Highway in the Movies, which features Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, which is kind of cool. Yeah, just a really fun listen. I've been grooving on it a lot. Blake?
I do have an artist recommendation, but first I have to say, please check out Malibu by Kim Petras.
Didn't see that one coming.
It just released. It is phenomenal. It's a bop, etc. But also, I want to shout out the 1975. I've been listening to their album, A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, so much lately. It's very, 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 very catchy. kind of reminds me of the Postal Service, if anybody knows.
Yeah. That's one of, like, some of their songs. They have a sound that very much goes back to that. It's just cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very unique. So, like, that's the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head to compare them to. My absolute favorite song by them is "Love It If We Make It." Phenomenal song. If you just want to check out one song by them, look at that one. Absolutely my favorite. Very, very
I really love that album name. A Brief Inquiry into Unrelated.
It's great,
I love
right?
Those like abstract names.
They have they have some very interesting skits that
Okay.
kind of fit that title theme. It's definitely unique.
I just like that aesthetic for like no reason at all. Like I think on one of Foster the People's albums, they have a song called "The Beginner's Guide to Destroying the Moon" or something like that. And like the song itself is like fine, but I just love the name.
Oh, that's the album great. That two time. I listen to that song all the time. I just didn't.
Yes, that song is great.
I didn't place it to an album. All right, I'll listen to that tonight. Good. Thank you, Blake.
Yeah, I love that song. Yeah, that's great.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our second segment. Again, a big thank you to Blake for joining us in an area that he is kind of like uniquely qualified to speak about. Sorry, Jake.
Okay.
So that's
all right.
Big
Sure.
So again, Jake and Blake are both like kind of important names in competitive Go right now. So if you are interested in that, you can find them on Twitter. Are you still at BopperVGC, Blake, or did you change it?
I still am BopperVGC.
Okay, and Jake is Jake. I forget where your underscore.
I forget where your life is, Brendan.
Me too. So if you find
it's
it,
at the end.
Know.
The very end.
Okay, so it's at Major Bowman underscore. If you're interested in that. But for now, Jake and I are going to take a quick break while we kick Blake out of the studio, and then we'll be back to wrap up the episode for this week. So stay with us. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Soundproof Podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. So we're gonna wrap up our episode 20. We were able for you guys this episode to pump out one of our like customary longer ones, as opposed to sort of like the abbreviated version that we ran a couple weeks ago. We've got a couple of ideas. Our idea bank had kind of run dry. But we've sort of like dug a new well here. So we've got a couple ideas that we're going to try and pump out over the next month or two to hopefully do, longer content-filled episodes more often than not. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's been a little bit tough to get stuff going these past 2 weeks because there just isn't a whole lot to talk about, within the VGC scene. But we're both still really enjoying the whole process of recording and editing and uploading and all that stuff. So goal is to keep producing this content. I'm not gonna lie, I did just set the defense date for my thesis a couple days ago, and I am not at all stressed about that. So we might be a little bit sporadic at which is my fault. I will go ahead and say that up front. That will be my fault if that happens.
As usual. So yes, hey. Of course, we at Soundproof are always very much proponents of making sure you take care of your real life things before you take care of your Pokemon podcast things. So I guess we will make an allowance for Jake to defend his thesis. But yeah, until that time, we're going to try and pump out the content as best we can. As far as this week goes, big thank you to Blake for coming on. I thought that the discussion between you guys, as I tried my best to wrap my head around a lot of things that were being thrown at me, was really cool. So I thought that was some good stuff. And like we mentioned, we've got some cool things in the works, assuming we are diligent enough to pull it together. So pray for us. We'll try our best. But for now, that's going to do it for episode 20 of Soundproof. You can find us, of course, on all of our socials, at SoundproofCast on Twitter, at MrBdog46VGC on Twitter, at MajorBowman_ on Twitter. That's the best place to reach us. And of course, you can find our podcast, as you did already, anywhere you get your podcasts. We will be back in a couple weeks with episode 21. Thanks for joining us this week, and we will see you next time.